Everybody, it's Eugene Lee Show, and welcome to episode 44 of Forensics Talks. I want to welcome everybody here, and don't forget, as always, there's the comments section, so make sure that you drop in any questions or comments that you might have. And of course, I always like to know where people are from. So the farther away you are, the better it is. So please tell us where you're from as well. Just one announcement here today, and that is something that I announced just last week, and that is the Forensic Photography Symposium, which is going to be on January 17th to 20th. So I'm going to be hosting this event. It's going to be dedicated to forensic photography. If you are working in forensic identification, crime scene investigation, and you use a digital camera to document evidence, whether it's for crash scenes, fire scenes, crime scenes, whatever it might be, then this is really dedicated to you. So what you can do is you can just jump on and get over to the website. Let me just bring that up here. So it's just ai2-3d.com/FPS. Even if you land on the main page, there's an image there. If you click on it, it'll send you over to this particular area. So keep it in mind. Reserve that week, January 17 to 20, 2022. All right, let's get started with our topic for today. So my guest today is George Reis, and he's worked from 1989 to 2004 at the Newport Beach Department in Southern California as a forensic photographer, image analyst, crime scene investigator, and latent fingerprint examiner. He introduced digital imaging to that agency in '92 and making them one of the first law enforcement agencies in the world to utilize this type of technology. Since 2004, George has been the president and owner of Imaging Forensics, Inc., and he's been providing expert witness services in forensic imaging analysis, forensic video analysis, and forensic and technical photography. He's provided training throughout the United States to individuals and agencies, including the FBI, Secret Service, and the U.S. Army Crime Lab. Internationally, he's done training for agencies in Hong Kong, Singapore, Qatar, Canada, and Australia. He's regularly called as an expert witness and has testified in depositions in federal, state, and military courts. And George is a certified forensic video analyst through LEVA, and that's the Law Enforcement and Emergency Services Video Association. He's certified in forensic photography and imaging through the IAI, and he's also well known for one of his early books, Photoshop CS3 for forensics professionals. And I'm definitely going to ask him about that today. So let me bring him in. Hey, George, how you doing today?
Hey, great, Eugene. Thanks. Wonderful introduction. Thanks very much.
All right. Well, I appreciate you being here, and I've got a lot of questions. And so there's no rules here. We can go wherever we want to go. But I always like to start sort of at the beginning, before you were with the police. And did you start off as a photographer? Were you like the kind of person that was always interested in, hey, I love shooting photos, or was it more about policing for you?
No, it definitely was photography. And my first career was photojournalism. When I was a senior in high school, I was hired as a full-time photographer for my local newspaper. Later on, I then went to work as a staff photographer for a couple of years at the Los Angeles Times. Then I did freelance work for a few years. I actually went broke doing the freelance stuff.
Okay.
And the way I ended up at the police department was back when they used to have printed newspapers, there would be classified ads. And in the classified ad was a job offer for a police photographer at Newport Beach Police. And I applied, I got that. I thought I'll be there for a year. I'll get back on my feet, go back and freelance some more. And I fell in love with it. So it turned out to be an accidental career, which I'm really thrilled I ended up here.
And interestingly, I mean, you spent some time there, and then what made you sort of like, after 15 years, or was it 15 years, and then you decided, hey, I'm going out on my own? What was the impetus there to do that?
Well, so I've always had the entrepreneurial spirit. So that's one aspect there. I just really like that. But I think secondarily, as I started getting into digital imaging at the police department, and I think a lot of us probably don't remember that there used to not be digital cameras. We used to all use film. And that transition that we made in 1992 was very, very early in the world of digital imaging. And so I started doing consulting work, helping other police departments make the same transition. And then I started getting asked by conferences to speak. And then I started doing some training. and a little bit of private casework. And as I was doing those things, I was thinking, this is just marvelous, helping other people take advantage of this technology and showing them how to use things like Photoshop. Photoshop is really where I spend a lot of my time. Was just very rewarding, number one. And number two, I love not having to set an alarm clock on a day-to-day basis. So it just made sense to make that transition when things got quite busy in that other aspect.
In the introduction, I had asked, or I had said that you had introduced some of these technologies to the police, and I'm just wondering about back then. What was it? What kinds of things were you doing that started or started to kick this off with the police then?
Yeah, so in 1992, I read an ad in a newspaper for a Kodak digital camera, the DCS 200. 1.4 megapixel camera, had a price tag of $10,000, and that was like this great drop in price because their previous version was $30,000, and you actually had to carry a briefcase-sized hard drive with you when using it. So the DCS 200, there was a spinning hard drive inside. And I looked at that, and I was doing fingerprint comparisons, and I was entering fingerprints into our APHIS system. And the method for doing that was very archaic. You would use a Polaroid to photograph a 5-power enlargement of the fingerprint. You get a piece of tracing paper and draw the ridges. And then you take another Polaroid, reducing that drawing back down to 1:1. And I thought, I bet this digital imaging technology can be used to do better on that, to get us better results, to get us more accurate drawings of the fingerprints, to show the particular features of the fingerprint more precisely. And so that's where I first started using it at Newport. Is we bought that camera, we bought Photoshop, and I started photographing fingerprints and doing some enhancement, doing the drawings in Photoshop. Our hit rate tripled in our APHIS system.
Really?
Yes. Yeah, it was really great. And so that's where I started. And then later on, we started utilizing less expensive digital cameras when they came out for some of our crime scene photography. And then I started doing some video analysis work there as well.
Okay. So, I mean, you've obviously been doing this for some time. What kinds of things sort of stick out in your mind as really changing significantly from, kind of like the early years of digital forensic or imaging forensics versus today? Like what is the main thing that sticks out for you?
Well, I think the main thing is the ability for everybody to record lots of good stuff. So we used to have a dedicated camera. Now, I wouldn't recommend using a cell phone camera to record a crime scene, but everybody does have a cell phone with them. So there's a potential that anybody can record something using that device that they have in their pocket all the time. And even separate from that, the ability to just download, have instant access, transmit a picture from one location to another. Just imagine you're at a scene and you need someone else, a specialist, to look at a piece of evidence that you see there. Photograph it, send it over to them, get on the phone, and you're talking, within a minute of seeing the piece of evidence with an expert.
Yeah, for sure. Now you do video and of course images and, the documentation part, but also the analysis part and, sort of the back end, like, which is presenting this in some form of a report or whatever. In terms of the analysis, what are probably the most requested types of analysis that people are coming to you for?
Well, so everyone always says, I need this image enhanced, and they don't necessarily mean that they need it enhanced. Mm-hmm. I get more work that's video-based than still image-based. And in video, a lot of times what they want to determine is just, what is it that's happening? So, how come I can't see something? Is that a weapon that the person is reaching for in their waistband, or is it something else? So they want to be able to understand the details or the sequence of events that are going on in video. With still images, I'd say a majority of my work is authentication. So determining, has this image been photoshopped? Is it a true representation of what occurred at the time that the photograph was taken?
Do you find that there's a big gap between what is possible and what people believe is possible?
Yeah, on the video side, we all heard about deep fakes. That concept is in the news quite a bit. I haven't seen a true deep fake in my work to date. So I think it's pretty standard that once you see something that's on the news, once people start talking about it, everyone thinks it's everywhere.
Right.
And it's not necessarily. And then for altered still photos, I get a lot of people that swear that this image had to have been altered and find no evidence of it in many cases. Sometimes when I find it, I'm pretty excited because I go, wow, okay, here's one that actually has the kind of changes. But then also sometimes there's things that look suspicious that turn out to have very simple explanations. You have a scan of a PDF document or a PDF that's a scan of a printed document that originally started as a digital image. And through that process of printing it and scanning it and then making that PDF with additional compression, you get things in there that just look a little bit strange. And that oftentimes is an explanation for what.
Right. You had posted once something about like developing a set of like rule of thumb or whatever when doing enhancement, or like having sort of some kind of a procedure, or maybe there's when people send you something, there's sort of like a process that you go through from originally looking at the image to being able to say something about it. Is that something you can comment on?
It might. I don't remember the post you're speaking of because it
was a blog. It was a blog post, and it was from like 6 years ago.
Yeah, it was probably the last blog post I made.
Yeah.
I should update that. So thanks for reminding me. But I think one of the things to always think about when analyzing both still images and video images is to, when first looking at it, kind of interrogate the evidence. Determine what it is from a technical standpoint that you're looking at. Then secondarily, think about the scope of what your assignment is. What is it that your goal is in doing this? So when I was at a police agency, one of the things would be, we want to put out an image of a suspect to patrol. So with that goal in mind, what am I starting with? What do I need to get to that goal? When I get to that goal, stop and then send it out. So It might be a fingerprint, and we need to be able to clarify it enough to see, let's say, enough Galton points to be able to get a good result in the APHIS system. Or I need to clarify it enough to be able to do a comparison with a known fingerprint. So always thinking about that goal that we have in mind and then clarify it in order to get it so that we can reach that goal. And those goals will be different in many different cases.
Right. So in terms of because we're talking about digital images and not film anymore, what kinds of tools would you recommend that somebody needs in their kit? Like what are sort of the basic or the fundamental things to be working with digital images and video?
And you're speaking from a software standpoint.
Software standpoint, right.
Yeah. So with still images, I generally am using two tools. I'm using Photoshop quite a bit, especially for any of the clarification issues. I said two. I'm going to speak about more.
Okay.
With still images, I also use a companion product from Adobe called Bridge, which that actually allows us to see a lot of metadata in the file and to sort through our files, find the best one to work with. For some things you can't do in Photoshop. Photoshop is not a forensics tool, but it has so many features that it can be used as a forensics tool very effectively. But there's some things it just plain doesn't do. So with that, I use a product called Amped5. So Amped is the software company, 5, F-I-V-E. They do a lot of clarifications that we can't do within Photoshop. And then for authentication, I use another product by Amped called Authenticate, which is an excellent program and really helps give you a lot of clues as to where to look visually for those authentication things. So lots of great features there. And then on the video side, once again, Amped5 is a great tool. Photoshop is a great tool. We can actually open video files directly in Photoshop and do all of the same things in the same way in Photoshop with video that we could with still images. Input Ace is an excellent program for being able to open up lots of different kinds of files from various DVRs, transcoding them into something else that can be used, concatenating files to bring them all together into a single video. Media Info, great freeware tool for getting information about the video file itself. FFmpeg. And I work on a Mac a lot, and I use something called FFworks, which is a FFmpeg interface that is just drag and drop easy, which is real nice.
Like a GUI, it gives you like buttons. Okay, so it's not all typing code all the time or whatever.
Exactly.
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Well, I think the point here though is that you're not sitting there with your Photoshop open and that's the only tool you use. There's a lot of different things that you have to have sort of in your arsenal here to approach different problems maybe. It would seem to me though that Photoshop is still probably one of the biggest tools that are used for image analysis. Is that fair to say? Probably the most popular?
I don't know the numbers, but just based upon the training that I do, lots and lots of agencies utilize Photoshop. Some of them, because of budgetary reasons, Photoshop ends up being pretty inexpensive. Some of them because they want to have more than one tool. So there's multiple reasons for wanting to do it, or they want the convenience of having a tool that once you get something into Photoshop, you can pretty much do 90% of anything you want to do, including multiple methods of outputting and so on. So yes, I think it is probably, if not the most popular tool in still images, at least it's got to be right up there.
Right. So we've been talking about like Photoshop is a great tool for enhancement and things like that. And but what about things like making comparisons? Comparing things as well. Like, do you find that that's something that you commonly do as well?
That's the only place I do my comparisons is in Photoshop. So okay. Photoshop is great because it's really easy to make layouts in a lot of different ways. So you can, number one, synchronize multiple images together. So you can keep them as separate documents and synchronize your zoom and scrolling so that everything stays aligned, which is nice. You can take multiple images into the same document. You can take multiple video files into the same document. You can take video files and still images into the same document. And then through layers, we could perhaps mark up those documents. And you could use lots of different methods for doing that markup. And then we can output for the purposes of demonstrative evidence. So we can export out as still images, as multi-page PDF documents, as video files. So pretty much anything that you need as an end result, you can get out of Photoshop, which is really
right. I was just thinking that, more recently, the past year, we've spoken a bit, but excuse me, I have a feeling that we exchanged emails like a very long time ago, and the topic might have been photogrammetry for some reason. And so I'm wondering, do you assist occasionally with things like suspect height analysis or items like this using photogrammetry?
Yeah, so using reverse projection photogrammetry, absolutely. And then with smaller objects, if your camera back is parallel to the subject matter, you can do very simple measurements in Photoshop, but doing something that's more sophisticated, no. But height analysis, absolutely. It's a great tool for that. Superimposing two images or even creating masks so you can slide a slider to see the top image versus the bottom images, kind of like what some people would do as a before and after, but instead it's the subject and it's the height chart.
Right, right. Okay. And I mean, you're obviously, I've seen some of your photographs, so you're obviously a very good photographer as well. Are you looking at some other things now with the digital images, like using photogrammetry, like creating 3D models? Is that something that potentially you could do?
Yeah, so 3D modeling is a big interest of mine and has been for a long time. In photogrammetry in general, I remember when Panoscan had their camera that they actually used a tripod where you would take your 360 scan at two different heights. Yep. And you'd include a ruler in there, and then you could get your measurements of everything in your scene, which just was kind of like a real nice, simple easy application. And when they came out with that, I thought, well, that's quite interesting. And being able to take measurements of things that you didn't measure originally, that's important to all of us, I think. So that's really nice. And a lot of times I end up with needing to measure things that are maybe on two different planes, or that follow a curved surface. And for that, photogrammetry is really nice. In 3D modeling, you just think about that fingerprint that's wrapped around the bullet cartridge, and you just think, yeah, I could take a whole bunch of pictures and stitch them together, but wouldn't it be nice if I could just get a nice 3D model and unwrap that? Right. And I think you do that in your Cloud Compare course with a tire impression or something.
That's right. Yeah. There's definitely some opportunities there. Let me ask you. So, if somebody is interested in this kind of area, whatever, in terms of training and certification, what would you recommend as a kind of background, or what places or what kind of options do people have available for training, and what should they be looking for in terms of certification? Because you have more than one. You've got a few different things under your belt.
Yeah, so there's a few things. Number one, as far as a certification in forensic photography, the International Association for Identification offers the only certification currently. There used to be another organization that offered a certification, and they no longer exist. So if you're seeking certification in forensic photography, that's the place to seek that. For forensic video analysis, I think LIVA has the most respected certification there is. It's a really challenging process, and a very good one. It gives you a nice firm basis in your forensic video analysis workflow, and a good understanding of that technology. The IAI does offer a certification in forensic video analysis as well. I previously was certified there. I didn't renew it when it came up. It's a very good one as well. It's not as rigorous, which means that might be a good place to start, and then seek the LIVA one later. So those would be the places I would look for certification. For training, I believe the IAI might have a great resource of approved training for their programs. So that's a good place to go. Training in video analysis, I'm going to point people to LIVA again, but there's other places too. Resolution Video provides really excellent training. Individual manufacturers of software, so Ocean Systems, Amped. I can't think of all of the different forensic tools that are out there, but they all offer great training as well. So those would be some various sources. But I think for someone that's seeking this as a new career, which if that's where your question's going to, I think the main thing is I would join organizations or go to conferences for the organizations such as the IAI and LIVA, and get to know people and find out kind of what it's about. Maybe go on a ride along with a crime scene investigator or a forensic photographer or a video analyst, spend a half a day with somebody and see if that's what you want to go into and what their agency requires.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. And I mean, you've testified at court quite a bit. So my question would be, when you do testify, regardless, if it's for prosecution or defense, are you finding that there are a lot of people that are not certified, or people that, maybe come from a different background, that, they're offering these kinds of services, and, they still get in as an expert, and maybe their work may or may not be as good? What are you finding when you go to trial for people who are, looking at your work from the other side?
Yeah, it's a difficult question, because I don't want to, say bad things about other people too much.
Yeah. But it's a real issue, right? I mean,
it is a real issue, and there are people who do come from other backgrounds, and they think, boy, business has slowed down in the last few years. I'm going to go into forensics, and they come into forensics, and they don't know the basics. I had a case where somebody thought that a pixel is not the smallest visual evidence in a digital image, and they upsampled their image like 9.6 times, and said, yes, unlike Mr. Reis, I'm able to show the detail within the pixels, and that's why I'm able to get such a precise measurement. Yeah, it's frightening. Or interpolation. I have a case where somebody was asked in court to define interpolation, which is a pretty standard term. It's not even necessarily an imaging term. I mean, it's a general use term.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, I think it's when I describe things in my own words as opposed to using a dictionary definition.
Wow, that's interesting.
It is. And so that's an idea of things that are out there. We're going to run into people that aren't trained, and judges don't know. Judges say, oh, you've been working in video production for the last 20 years. You obviously know more than most people do about this stuff. I'm going to let you testify. I'm going to declare you as an expert. And it's hard. I think as certifications become more well known, then we'll see that problem less, because people will seek that. And then I'm going to go to the positive side of the same thing, though. I've had people take classes from me, and I've run into people just in court cases that have come from these other backgrounds and then have sought the training and gone through and pay for it on their own and get that background and then send out their reports for proper peer review.
Right.
So there are people who are out there that are doing an excellent job that come from these other backgrounds, but they take the steps necessary to make sure they're doing things right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's nothing. I don't think I'm suggesting that, if you're not certified, then you can't, you can't do good work. You absolutely.
Oh, I know you're not saying that.
Yeah, no, and there are definitely some good people, but of course we have to weigh both sides of the coin. And you made a really good point. If the judge is the gatekeeper, it's extremely rare, as you know, for an expert to not be qualified in some way. They might restrict your testimony, or they may do something like this, but almost always, if defense or Crown has an expert to offer up, they usually get accepted, regardless of maybe the type of science that they're using or whatever. And this has come up before, like, so for example, there was the Netflix Exhibit A that talked about the case in Texas, like the George Powell case, where there was like suspect height analysis and stuff, and there was a huge discrepancy between what one side was saying and what the other side was saying about the suspect height analysis. And I think I believe you commented on that, or maybe somebody sought your opinion on that one before. But do you remember anything regarding to that?
Well, that case, so that several years later, after Powell had spent time in jail, it came to someone's attention, I don't remember the details of it, that this height might be wrong. And I believe they then retained Grant Fredericks to do a new independent analysis. So at the time that Grant was working on that case, he sent me a copy of his report and asked for my peer review, which I provided. He did an excellent job on it. And then later in a case that I testified on a height analysis, that case was brought up as being a question about whether or not the science met the standards of court, because the person who originally did the measurement incorrectly got his evidence into court. So now here we are 10 years later, and we're fixing that, but yet that case is brought up as, you guys don't have all your ducks in a row yet, which was interesting. I was allowed to testify in that case in New York that I'm speaking of, but it just shows that science, posits a theory. They test the theory, that we learn new things, and then maybe we modify that theory. Scientists, or people who do work that's technical work, may do things incorrectly. That doesn't mean we throw out the science. Just as when science evolves, we don't necessarily throw out the old science, we modify the science as we go. Right. So I think judges have a little bit of, some judges don't have that technical background or that science background, so they don't really understand the difference in the way that things get modified over time.
Right.
But in this case, I think the original examiner was just way over his head, didn't exactly know what he was doing. And so that was more of a user error than anything else, with devastating results.
Yeah, I'd like to ask you about some of the cases maybe you've had to work on. So, without getting into trouble or saying anything you can't, but are there any notable cases that really stand out to you as an exemplar sort of case where digital or forensic image analysis really helped the case, or there was maybe something unique about it that you could offer?
Yeah, I'll mention the first big case I ever worked on. It was while I was still at the police department in Newport Beach, and as an agency assist, we assisted another agency that had a homicide case. A little girl was killed in her bedroom, and the police initially arrested a homeless man as the suspect, and they recovered his wet sweatshirt, and they photographed him full length and close-ups, and then after taking the sweatshirt, they then did more analysis of that and more photographs. They came up without any evidence on the sweatshirt at the time that they were originally analyzing it. Later on, they accused 2 other people. Those people spent 6 months in jail. They had a trial for them. Defense asked that the sweatshirt be analyzed by an independent lab. They photographed it, and they saw spots on it, stains on it. They had those stains analyzed, and they found blood belonging to the victim on it. And the police and the district attorney, they're all looking at this and saying, how can this be? That's been analyzed. And they pulled up their photographs of the sweatshirt, and you don't see stains in those places. Oh. So did it get contaminated after the fact? Did somebody plant evidence, or was something weird about the photography? And in that case, that was all photographed on film. This is in the mid or late 1990s. And they brought me the photographic prints. So, yeah, I don't see anything. They brought me the negatives. I scanned the negatives. I don't see anything. But then through color isolation techniques, by basically controlling contrast based on differences in color values as opposed to brightness values, I was able to find that the stains existed originally in the exact same spots where the independent lab photographed them.
Oh, interesting. Yeah,
that resulted in charges being dropped against the 2 people that were then on trial. The homeless guy ended up then going to trial, being found guilty. Escaped from custody.
He did, really?
Yes, he did. Oh, they left him alone in the courthouse, and he just walked out.
Jeez, crazy. I remember as you were speaking, I was remembering something I had seen online. This might be a few years ago now, but it had to do with somebody using a Photoshop filter, like a swirl or a blur, which could have been which was undone.
Yes.
And do you remember that one, or can you?
I do remember that one. That was a child pornography, child abuse.
Yeah. That's it.
And this person was posting photographs or sharing them or whatever those people do with others, and he would be in them himself. And he used a filter, I believe it's called the twirl filter in Photoshop, which causes a psychedelic appearance almost of the thing as it twirls around. And you would think, oh yeah, nobody could undo that. Well, it turns out you can. And I can't remember who it was, but I want to think it might have been Canadian law enforcement that ended up discovering that could be untwirled, which led to identification of that person.
That's interesting. So they must have just used some pretty simple settings, and you could just say, well, do the reverse to switch direction, and voila, you've got what you need probably.
Yeah, if you could hit that center point correctly, you can undo it even with a substantial twirl. You can undo it, and it's kind of amazing that that's something that's repairable, which tells us in the forensics business, if we're doing redaction, and if the redaction is important, we're redacting for the purpose of hiding the identity of a confidential informant, a police officer, a minor that's in the image, that we need to use the kinds of redaction that aren't reversible.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Geez, I lost my train of thought. I was just going to ask you another question about the Photoshop stuff, but were there any other cases more recent, or something that you're doing anything interesting on?
Well, you mentioned the George Powell case. I did just recently work on a case in Philadelphia that was a similar thing. It was a person was arrested, spent like the last 10 years in jail on a murder case. This was a robbery that turned into a murder. His partner was killed, as well as I recall. He gets out, and I was asked to do a height analysis on that and show that it could not have been the suspect.
Okay.
And in that case, I recommended that they have a second analyst do a complete independent analysis. The other analyst came to the same conclusion I did. So that person, I think, has now been cleared of those charges, but I think he's done other things. So
right.
He's still in jail.
Let me ask you a question about, and I remember what I was going to ask you. It had to do with, for example, I mean, all the different areas of forensics are sort of under scrutiny, and to sort of be more objective and to be, more rigid in their methods and everything else. So are there any areas in image analysis that you see having a need for research, further development, further exploration? Like, are there any gaps right now that you can see? It's like, yeah, these 2-3 areas are really important to, focus on in terms of research and for your benefit, for people like you that are doing your work?
Yeah, that's a good question. And the answer is there's probably a lot that we need to do research on. Back several years ago, what was it? I don't remember the year, 2013, that who was it that wrote that report on challenging a lot of forensic science, especially in the comparative analysis fields? The
National Academy of Science.
Yes. So in that report, there were a lot of challenges as to the state of forensic science, especially in comparative analysis fields. And one of the underlying concepts there was law enforcement has kind of developed these techniques and tested them the way that they test them and come up with results that they think are valid, but it hasn't really been addressed by science or academia. And that up until recently has been valid. Sure, the tools that we use are scientific. They operate the same way every single time. They do what they report to do, and if they didn't, then those bugs would be found and they'd be corrected. And we know that. But the things that we're using them for, the ways in which we're using them, I think those things all should come under the magnifying glass of academia, of the legal community in general, and of science to verify them. I don't think we're necessarily using tools incorrectly or that our tools aren't doing what we think, but I think that for the confidence of everyone that faces our judicial system, that would just be really, really helpful. And then to make sure that we don't use those tools incorrectly.
Right.
In addition. So I think that in general, in the field of imaging, we really should do more. I get a pet peeve with rounding errors or of levels of precision. I think you and I have talked about this a little bit in the past. And use a piece of software, and you're measuring something that has 1-inch size pixels in an area, and your software tells you that this is 17.64329 inches. And we can't do that.
Right.
And so I think that there definitely is something that's needed to help practitioners understand the limitations of the tools that we're using.
Right. Now, do you see, for example, I know that, Adobe comes out with, Photoshop and maybe even other software now. The big word today is like artificial intelligence, right? So there are tools, that will help you fill in spaces. If you're sort of a creative person and you're doing creative photography or you want to work on your images, it'll sort of to understand what's behind a person, and it'll fill in the sand at the beach or the water kind of thing. But do you see or do you know of anybody that may be looking at some of these tools which could help people like yourselves working in this area?
Yeah. So the University of Colorado has the program that is the National Institute of Media Forensics. And I took a workshop there in authentication maybe 6 or 7, 8 years ago. I can't remember how long ago. Dr. Catalin Gregoris teaches an excellent workshop in image authentication. And in that, we looked at some of those tools specifically for that. I know they're doing research with deep fakes as well. I'll go back to AMP. AMP has training in their tool called Authenticate. And in that, they discuss a lot of these uses as well. Dr. Hani Farid, who is at Cal State Berkeley, has done tons of research in artificial intelligence and its use in forensics as well. But I think his focus is moving a little bit away from forensics lately, but he had a lot of papers when he was at Dartmouth, and I think still some at Berkeley that are related and valuable in the forensics field and related to the use of AI.
Right, interesting. Actually, I noticed that while looking through your website, you had and it's a document from 2004, but there's still good information there. It's on the digital image integrity, and there was some interesting stuff there that people could get, because it's an important aspect to I think the type of work that you're doing. In terms of the future for you, what kinds of things are you, I mean, do you do any research, or do you do any testing? Are there things that you are working on at the moment that you can talk about?
Well, I think one thing I better work on is updating my blog.
Yeah.
But separate from that, yeah, I like to test tools that I use. And I would encourage everybody to do that. You know, I teach courses, and in the courses when I teach them, I say, you know, here's a tool called X, and it does Y, and here's some sample images, and let's do this. And then I say, but don't take my word for it, and don't use just our samples, but go out and get pictures that you know the real world truth to, the ground truth of, and test the same thing. So I'll use deconvolution or de-blurring as an example. You have a car that's moving, or a camera that's moving, and you can't read the license plate. So you use this great tool, deconvolution tool, and all of a sudden you could read that license plate. You go, boom, there it is, and everything looks good, and you have a general understanding of what's happening, the shape of the blur you identify, and then the software kind of reverses that to try to make those lines or streaks or curves become dots. But how do you know it's really working right? Well, maybe you could go out and use two cameras, one that's held steady and using a fast shutter speed, one's a slower shutter speed and is moving around, and photograph a lot of different things. And then try that tool, and then look and see whether or not the results you get match the ground truth that you know that's recorded with the other camera.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice, because I know even for myself, experimenting and testing, it helps you define even like what the limit of a certain process is sometimes. Just, you know, you have the experience. It's like, you know what, I can go this far, but I can't go any farther than this, because then things are just going to break down, or I'm not going to be talking about the truth again, or whatever. So yeah, that's a great point. I wanted to ask you about training, and because you do a lot of training, but what are the different types of training courses that you offer to different agencies?
So it used to be that I offered several different courses specifically that were Photoshop related. So Photoshop for the forensic video analyst, Photoshop for the fingerprint examiner, Photoshop for the crime scene investigator, and so on. In reality now, I pretty much only do the one for forensic video analysis in that aspect of my work. I'm going to restart at least the fingerprint and maybe also question document work on that side. So in the Photoshop courses, I'll be looking at re-adding those. And then I teach forensic photography courses as well, which is fewer, but I used to partner with Eric Johnson, who is the chair of the Forensic Photography and Imaging Certification Board for the IAI. And he and I taught several courses together in forensic photography. And then I continue to do that separately from him as a separate course that I provide as well, but not as frequently as my Photoshop and video analysis courses.
Right. And at the beginning, I actually talked about the photography symposium that I'm having, and I've actually asked you to speak on that. And I was wondering if you just tell us a little bit about what your topic is going to be on.
Well, so something that we discussed is this concept of that I call witness perspective photography or scene replication photography. And it's the concept of somebody describes something that they saw, and they maybe are 100 yards away, or maybe they're 10 feet away. Or maybe it's really pitch black at night and it's dark. Or maybe there's glare, it's right at sunset and there's glare. And the question might be, what are those lighting conditions like? And could they really have discerned what they say they have? And of course, there's no way that I know what someone else sees. But what I can do is I can go back to a scene under the exact same circumstances and photograph what I see, so the jury can see what I saw under those circumstances, and then can determine then what the lighting was like, how bright things were, how small or how large things were. So scene replication or witness perspective photography.
Excellent. Yeah, super interesting and very valuable topic as well. You actually gave me a little gift before, which was you actually have like a PDF of your Photoshop book here, and I'm going to see if I can bring it up here. Let me get the link here, but I'll just bring it up here. But what I'll do is I'm going to give people the link, and I'll just drop that into the comments or the description at some point, and I'll just share it here so people can see. But basically, it's this right here. So George has been kind enough to give us a copy of the PDF, and also there's a little book CD with a zip file, and I'm assuming that there's some exercise files on there.
Yeah, all of the sample images that are used in the book are in that, and then you could use those as exercises if you wish. The book isn't written as a textbook with exercises, although if I do decide to update it, maybe I'll include something like that in there.
I think you should. And having said that, though, I know that I've talked about working on a book and it's impossible for me. So anyone who says they're going to work or at least you got a book done. But it's a lot of effort. I know people that write books, you don't write it for the money, right? And you got to sort of fit it into everything else. So I know how that goes for sure. The other thing I was going to ask was, because we're just getting on a little bit of time here, but if somebody wants to get a hold of you, is the best way just through the website, or actually, could I show your LinkedIn profile? Is that something I could offer here?
You're welcome to do that. Or if you just want to come by the house and knock on the door, that's...
You're very kind. That's great. Yeah, George, you can find him on LinkedIn here and also through his website. So if you just go over to imaging forensics, let me see, there's a contact form here. I don't know how often, but actually, well, there you go. He gives his email right down there. So you could always reach out to George that way. Excellent. Well, George, listen, thank you so much for your time. I think you're doing some great work. Definitely think about the book, though, because I know that there's a lot of interest in it for sure. And I'll be looking forward to seeing you at the symposium on and looking at expert witness, or not expert witness, but eyewitness perspectives. That's really cool.
It'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it as well. Thanks, Eugene.
Excellent. All right, just hang back, and then I'll come back to you in just a second here.
Sure.
All right. Okay, folks. Well, that does it for this one. Again, we just talked about the Forensic Photography Symposium, so I'll just bring that up one more time in case you're interested. I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be a great event. People like George and people who are very, very experienced and educated in forensic photography and imaging are looking to get people there from all over the world. So if you're interested, go ahead and click on the link. You can pre-register, and we'll send you information when registration actually opens. So on that note, I want to say thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate your time. Have a great day, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.